Oh my goodness! We're in my new car! This is amazing! This is my 2024 Mazda CX-5 GS trim. And today is day number 4 that I've had this car. I picked it up on Thursday, today is Sunday. And I picked up the car with about 10 kilometers on the odometer. It currently has 234 kilometers on it. And it has been the most blissful, wonderful 224 kilometers that I've ever driven. I am already in love with this automobile. And I can't wait to tell you all about it. So, let's go for a drive. And I will tell you all about it. Turn that on. Do that. So, as you guys know, I test drove a lot of cars before landing on this one. I'm gonna go this way. I test drove a lot of cars before landing on this one, and it took having to test drive a lot of cars to find the perfect car. And the biggest reason for that was I found myself uncomfortable in a lot of cars in the seat. It would appear that it is the style now in cars in general to have very sporty oriented seats. And what that means is very aggressive and firm bolstering. Seats that kind of keep you right in place when you're going around turns and stuff. And that turns out to not be a great thing if you are a large person like me. I'm 6 feet tall, 280 pounds, a little bit thick, and yeah, in some of these cars, rather than sitting between the bolstering, I sat on top of the bolstering, and that was very uncomfortable. Namely, the bolstering on the bottom cushion would poke into my thighs, and it would hurt. It would be very uncomfortable. And then in some other cars, most notably the Buick Envista, which I was pretty comfortable in that car's seat, but the seatbelt buckle would poke into my thigh. And so it seems in these modern cars, the driver's compartment is in general just narrower, which may be for safety reasons. I accept that it may be necessary. But the seat comfort thing just sucked. And so I had to test drive a lot of cars to find one that didn't hurt me, that I wasn't in pain in some way or form sitting in it. And the Mazda CX-5 turned out to be the best. One of the cars I was originally considering the most was the Mazda CX-30, which is Mazda's smallest crossover, a little smaller than this. And the CX-30 had the worst driver's seat comfort. The bolstering was just super aggressive and super firm. The Nissan Qashqai was a little bit better, but still uncomfortable for my liking. But this car has the best seat comfort. I still feel the seatbelt buckle a little bit, especially if it depends on what I'm wearing. I just took my jacket off here. And so the only thing between the seatbelt buckle and my thigh is the pajama pants I'm wearing. So I can feel it a little bit, and I wish I didn't, but it's not nearly as bad as, say, the Buick Envista. or the Mazda CX-30. I test drove everything that I was willing to buy, with the exception of the Toyota Corolla Cross, because I just couldn't get my hands on one. I test drove everything that I was considering, and this by far is the most comfortable. And you know, I talk about the seatbelt buckle 99% of the time. I don't feel it at all. I'm not even thinking about it. So it's just been wonderful. Driving this car has just been, I love it so much. I'm always excited when I get in and drive it. It hasn't quite yet settled down to just mundane, you know, it's a car. I'm still super excited whenever I get in this thing and drive it. The seat is extremely comfortable, and as per usual, I've got it all the way back and all the way down, and I think I have reasonable leg room. I can stretch out my left leg here if I want to. Normally I have it propped up on the floor. That's just normally how I sit. My right leg, I think the comfort is fine, and yeah, it's just been wonderful. And I love everything about this car, so I'm going to tell you about it. Remember how I said I didn't want a car that was white, black, or gray? I bought a gray car. The color of this thing is polymetal gray. It's an optional color on this thing. I had to pay $300 extra for it, and I love it. The first time I saw it, I thought it was a blue color, and it is kind of a blue. It's kind of a bluish gray. You could almost call it like a drab blue. And it's just one of those colors that, especially depending on the kind of light you get it in, it's beautiful. Even though it's technically gray, I love it. And the first time I saw it, I'm like, that's the color I want. I was open to getting either polymetal gray or deep crystal blue. And a polymetal gray GS trim was what happened to be coming first, so that's what I put the deposit on. I think I made the better choice. I love the color of this thing, even though it's technically gray. It's a beautiful kind of bluish gray, and it kind of changes depending on the lighting. So I made the right choice with the color for sure. So the trim levels we have for the Mazda CX-5 here in Canada are different than the ones you have in the US. So the CX-5 is the second smallest crossover from Mazda, up from the CX-30, sits below the CX-50. Mazda's been making the CX-5 for a little over a decade. This generation has been going since 2020, so it is a few-year-old design, but to me it still feels super modern, not like the Nissan Qashqai, which felt super old on the inside and it looks old on the outside. Nissan Qashqai hasn't changed since 2017, and I've now read reports that Nissan's probably going to discontinue it altogether. This car, few-year-old design, still feels super modern though. It feels just as modern inside as something like the Nissan Rogue, which was last updated in 2022. So it's a few-year-old design. This car is built in Japan, which is great. It came on a boat here from Japan. That's what I was waiting for. It was on the boat to Canada from Japan, which is kind of cool. But yeah, it's a Japanese-built car. It's got the sticker on the inside of the driver's door. It says "Made in Japan." Really cool to see. Not all Mazdas are made in Japan. In fact, I think most of them now are made in Mexico. And I think there's been some rumblings that they may move production of the CX-5 to Mexico, possibly as soon as the 2025 model year. There's also rumblings that the 2020... Oh, you little jerk. What are you doing? There's rumblings that they may update the CX-5 for 2025, so this could be the last year for this generation. And that's fine. That means they've had a few years to work out all the bugs. This thing's been refined to hell and back. which is great. But yeah, I'm very happy to have a Japanese-made car. It's what I want. It's what I was. My original goal was, after all, right? I wanted a Japanese-made car, and I think I found one, and I found a good one. Let's go this way. So, what does this compete with, first of all? Well, this is larger than the Mazda CX-30. This is almost as big as the Nissan Rogue. In fact, I think it's just a few inches short of being as long as the Nissan Rogue, which I didn't quite expect. So this doesn't compete with all the other cars that I was testing. This actually competes with cars that are all larger than the ones that I was originally considering. This competes with the Toyota RAV4, not the Corolla Cross. It competes with the Honda CR-V, not the HR-V. So I bought all the subcompact crossovers that I test drove. I ended up buying a compact crossover bigger than everything I was considering, but that's okay. It means I'm not wanting for anything, right? So yeah, it's a what they call a compact crossover, or a compact SUV. The terminology seems to be very wishy-washy as to if you consider this an SUV or a crossover, or is it just a hatchback car, a lifted hatchback? I don't really know. Make sure my camera's still going. Yes, it is. But the point is, it's bigger than a subcompact crossover, and it's bigger than everything else I was considering, which is kind of funny. Remember, I was never considering a CX-5 from the beginning. I was considering the CX-30. It's so funny, all the cars I originally considered, and I ended up buying something that I wasn't originally considering. But I think I definitely bought the best thing. So that's how big the car is. What are we talking for powertrain and stuff? This thing has a 2.5 liter four-cylinder. Big four-cylinder engine. Most of the stuff I was considering was like a 2-liter four. Some of the stuff I was considering had a 3-cylinder. Some of it had like a 1.6 or 1.8 four-cylinder. This is a 2.5, a big four-cylinder, one of the biggest four-cylinders you can get now. The only four-cylinder engines I can think of that were this big or bigger were the GM Iron Duke. And I think the current Chevy Colorado has something like a 2.7 liter four-cylinder. That's a pickup truck. So it's a big engine compared to everything else I was considering. And actually, for a vehicle of this size, it's a big engine, period. Most other stuff of this size has like maybe a 2-liter. So what that means is, first of all, it's a low-stressed engine. It makes 187 horsepower. Now, if you go for the higher trim levels, you get a turbocharged, same engine, but it has a turbocharger on it, and it makes something like 250 horsepower. And as per usual with car, oh look at that, a Mazda friend. As per usual with car people these days, everybody says, get the turbocharger, you're wasting your money if you don't have the 250 horsepower. I don't understand. You're not racing this thing. It's a freaking crossover. It's a comfortable family hauler. You don't need 250 horsepower. 187 horsepower is more than enough for this thing, especially for someone like me, because I drive like a grandma. So this is the naturally aspirated version, and I'm glad to have that. Give me that simplicity, give me that reliability. Also, I think the naturally aspirated engine has like 1 or 2 miles per gallon better fuel economy than the turbo engine. But yeah, big engine, for a vehicle of this size compared to other people, which means it's a low stressed engine. You know, it's gonna be light wearing because it's not strung out all the time and under high stress. It also means it revs really low. I rarely get this thing above 2,000 RPM in the amount that I've driven it so far. The way I drive, it just rarely gets above 2,000 RPM, and that's fantastic. I like a low revving engine. I think it's got a lot of torque on the bottom end compared to other cars. It seems to be quite torquey at low RPMs, and all the beep boop computer stuff seems to know that because it shifts really early. Now, speaking of shifting, this thing has an old school transmission, old school engine, old school transmission, 6-speed automatic transmission, old school torque converter automatic. And that's also fine because it's proven and reliable. Old-fashioned design, super reliable. I would have loved to have a CVT. I think CVTs are cool. But give me that reliability, that simplicity. I'm perfectly fine. 6-speed automatic. It is an intelligent transmission though. It's a learning transmission, which means as you drive the car, it figures out how you drive, how heavy of a foot you have, and it adjusts shift points accordingly. So it's kind of funny, the first day I had this car, I noticed two things. It was quite jumpy. I'd press the throttle a little bit and it would really get off the line. And also it would allow itself to rev quite high before shifting, up to like, you know, maybe 2,500 or 3,000 RPM. In the last couple of days that I've been driving it, it's really calmed down. It knows that I want to accelerate slowly because I'm a grandma. And also it's shifting really low in the RPMs. It has learned that I'm a very light-footed driver, and so it's adjusted the transmission behavior accordingly and the throttle response behavior accordingly, and it's just perfect. Keeps the engine really low revs, and it accelerates as much as I like it to, and yeah, it's just been perfect. So, big 4-cylinder engine, old school automatic transmission, not great gas mileage. I knew that going into it. This thing is not going to get as good gas mileage as the Focus, and it is also not going to get as good gas mileage as pretty much every other one of its competitors. I knew that going into it. I accept that. I'm okay with that. People tend to get high 20s if you're lucky. Some people get mid 20s miles per gallon. A couple of unlucky people get like high teens, low 20s. Hopefully I'm not one of them. But again, I'm quite light-footed, so what I expect and hope is that I'll at least get mid 20s. I'm hoping I can get high 20s for miles per gallon. I got about high 20s in the Focus, so it'd be nice if I can match that. Mazda uses the same powertrain in the Mazda 3, the CX-30, and the CX-50. Or at least they use the same engine. The same 2.5 liter 4-cylinder is also used in the Mazda 3, CX-30, and CX-50. I would assume the same transmission is used too. So Mazda uses this powertrain everywhere, and that means that they make a ton of them, and again, they've refined it extremely. So it should be a very nice and very reliable and durable powertrain. And I'm sure in a Mazda 3 or a CX-30, I'm sure even the naturally aspirated version is quite peppy. But it's certainly enough power for me. I haven't opened it up yet. I'm not really interested in driving that way, but also I want to wait until I get 500 kilometers on this thing before I start, you know, really seeing what it does. I don't know if break-in periods are still a thing. The dealership didn't tell me anything about breaking it in. But yeah, I'm not gonna abuse it until at least 500 kilometers. Well, I'm never gonna abuse it at all, but I don't want to give it full throttle until then. Speaking of throttle, so one of the interesting things that this car has, and people say that most, if not all, cars with automatic transmissions do this. This is the first car I've ever been in that has it. Let me flip to some B-roll here and show you something a little interesting this car has with the gas pedal of all things. So look at this. First of all, floor-mounted gas pedal, which I've driven one car before that had it. That was my ex's Kia Soul, but certainly not something you see in most cars. But here's the interesting thing. So you push it down, and if you push just a little harder, do you hear that? It's got like a button at the end of the travel. It is a button, and apparently it's an electronic kickdown switch. So, and it works in both the automatic and the manual mode. So you press it before, all the way down before the button, and if you're in the automatic mode, it'll downshift maybe a gear or two when you're in the automatic mode, but no further. But if you press harder and you press the button at the bottom, it downshifts as far as it can go to give you the most passing power. And that goes for the manual mode too. If you gun it while you're in the manual mode, it'll still downshift even though you're in manual mode. If you hit that button, it'll downshift as far as it can go, even in the manual mode. Apparently people say that this is a thing that most automatic transmission cars have now. This is the first one I've ever seen. The Focus definitely didn't have it, and my mother's Buick Encore didn't have it, or at least they didn't have it in this strange button form. I mean, all those cars have, you know, throttle position sensors that sense when you're flooring it, and then it'll do the kick down. But yeah, very interesting. Never seen that before. So I started to talk about trim levels and then got into a bunch of other stuff. So the trim levels for the CX-5 are different in the US than we have in Canada. In the US, your base trim is called the Select, and then there's the Preferred, and then there's the Carbon Edition. Here in Canada, the base trim is called the GX. The next trim up is the GS. This is a GS trim, so second from the bottom trim. Is what I decided that I wanted to get. I may have been happy with a GX. I decided if I was going to have this car for the next 10 years, hopefully at least, I wanted to bump it up to the GS. The GS gets you a lot of extra creature comforts and a lot of extra tech that's just really nice to have. And I think the GS is like, or at least Mazda calls it, the most popular trim. So what you get on the GS trim that's not on the GX trim, I have leatherette seats compared to cloth seats. I didn't really care. I would have been just as happy with cloth seats, but leatherette seats, leatherette wrapped steering wheel. Again, I'm not sure if I cared about that or not. Heated seats are standard on all the trims. Heated steering wheel. This is something I've never had. Focus didn't have that, and I'm quite happy to have it. I actually use it quite a bit. You saw me turn it on here when we first started out. Heated steering wheel is really, really nice. I have a condition called Raynaud's syndrome. It's a very stupid, your body is just very dumb and sometimes closes off blood circulation to like your fingers or toes when it just doesn't have to. So sometimes I'll just have one finger on one hand that's like white and super cold because there's just no blood circulation. And the only fix is, it happens like as soon as I step outside, or it doesn't even have to be cold outside. It can just be a little bit cool. And I can be like inside, and if I haven't had the heat on, sometimes like one or two of my fingers will just turn white and really cold. It's not painful or anything. It's just kind of dumb and annoying. So this thing has a heated steering wheel, and I'm hoping that'll help with that. It's certainly very nice to have. The GS trim gets you dual zone climate control. So I've got automatic, electronic, dual zone climate control. I'm usually the only person in here when I'm driving it, so I could have gone without it. But it's kind of nice to have. My mother certainly likes it. She's someone who gets very cold. I'm someone who's usually quite warm. So she can have the heat cranked up and I can have it wherever I'm comfortable, and yeah, it's very, very nice. Radar cruise control. I've never driven a vehicle with radar cruise control. It's way cooler than I thought it would be. It's just kind of nice. Like, I have it turned on right now. There's no cars in front of me, but if I come up to a car in front of me, this thing will automatically slow down to match the speed of the car. And it's so smart that if the car in front of me so much as comes to a stop, this thing will come to a stop with it. That's really neat. I find that the cruise control itself is more intelligent than in the cars of old. I think I can feel it actually putting on the brakes. Like, if I have the cruise control on and I'm going downhill, like, the Focus will just speed up. Actually, if you speed up fast enough, the Focus will actually downshift to do engine braking. But I think this thing's actually putting on the brakes if you start speeding up because you're going downhill while you have cruise control on. So that's kind of neat. So it regulates the speed much better than a car like the Focus does. Lane departure warning, this thing has that, which is pretty neat. I actually don't know if this thing has blind spot monitoring. I don't know. If I do, it hasn't kicked in yet, but I honestly don't know if I have it. So we are going to turn cruise control off. This is quite a tight bend coming up. I'm doing 80. Sign says to slow down to 60. So I'll do that. It's a taller vehicle than I used to. The Focus, I would just go around this bend at 80 and it'll do it no problem. This thing being a taller vehicle, I don't want to take that risk. It's super nice and quiet in here. Seems to be just fine going over bumps. Oops, I just ran over a pothole I didn't mean to do, but I barely felt it. The Focus, that would have been quite crashy going over that. Of course, this thing has bigger wheels than the Focus too. So when you buy a Mazda CX-5, you get three wheel choices, 3 choices of wheels. We're coming up to the highway here. Am I gonna stab this thing on the highway? Sure, let's stab this thing on the highway. I haven't been on the highway with this since I took it home. We'll open it up a little bit on the highway. Still a bit timid taking this thing around sharp corners at speed. Alrighty, just like that, we're doing 110. Cool. So there's 3 sizes of tires that come on this thing. And that depends on the trim level you get. This being a lower trim level, I get the smallest tire, which is 17 inch. So 17 inch wheels on this thing. And that's actually perfect. Because when you get the larger tires, you get 55 series tires. On the 17 inch, you get 65 series tires. And what that means is that's how big your sidewall is. That's how much rubber there is between the edge of your wheel and the road. So it's the style today for a lot of cars to have these really thin tires, big wheels, rubber band tires, as little as like 40 series tires. And that hurts your road comfort. You get a lot of crashiness when you go over bumps. But this thing 17-inch wheels. They give you 65 series tires, and that's excellent. Give me that comfort. Also, I believe 17-inch tires are cheaper than the larger tires. So give me that big sidewall, give me that road comfort. Perfect. Also, less chance of damaging your wheels if you run over something really bad, because you've got more rubber between the wheel and the road. So 17-inch, 65 series tires. What kind of tires came on this thing? Yokohama's Geolandar G91A tires on this thing. Japanese tire. They put it on at the factory in Japan. They are okay tires. Some people say they're okay, some people really don't like them and immediately change them out for something else. They seem fine. Like I said, this thing's comfortable, it's quiet. A huge cut above the Focus. So I'll run them this winter. And then after that, I'll just use them in the summer only, and I'll get better tires for winter tires. How long's this video been going? I've driven right into the next town. Half an hour. Oh my goodness. So, GS trim, what else do you get? No sunroof, and that's perfect. I don't like sunroofs, and they're just another failure point, water leaking in. Give me that simplicity, give me that reliability, no sunroof, perfect. Obviously you got power windows, locks, it's got a rear window wiper. It's got a power liftgate, which is great. I don't think the GX trim has a power liftgate. I've got a power liftgate. You press a button on the key fob, liftgate opens, and then you press a button on the liftgate, it automatically closes. That's really nice. That's going to be good for hauling TV equipment in and out of this thing, because it's still going to be a work vehicle, right? And yeah, so when I test drove the CX-5 at the dealership, the one I test drove was a GT trim, so one trim level above this, and it had real leather seats. So I was worried going in the day I picked up this thing, I was worried if the leatherette seats were going to feel any different. One person on the internet said that the leatherette seats are less comfortable than the leather. Another person said they were more comfortable than the leather. Great. They feel exactly the same. So, I mean, the material itself, of course, the fake leather, it feels a bit closer to rubber maybe, or vinyl, than the real leather. They're still super nice. If you buy one of these things and you can only afford one of the lower trims, you're going to be just fine. The seats, the actual cushioning and everything feels exactly the same between the leatherette and the leather seats. No problem at all. What else? And of course, Mazda, not a lot of people pay attention to Mazda. I feel like they should, and I think people are going to start paying attention to Mazda, because for the money, you get a car that's just so nice, especially compared to someone like Toyota, who uses a lot of hard plastics in their interiors, or Honda, who puts the stiffest seats I've ever felt in my life on the HR-V. This thing is really nice. Everything is soft touch. This is soft touch. This is soft touch. Armrest here, soft touch. This is soft touch. Soft, soft, soft. Everything is soft touch. Almost no hard plastics in here. And that might not matter for some people, but it's just nice. It's just really nice to have. And that's great. You get rear vents in the back seat, rear vents in the center. That's really nice. I couldn't have cared less, because it's very rare that I'm going to have enough people in here to need the back seats. But it's nice to have. It's got 3 different drive modes: normal mode, sport mode, which I actually haven't used yet. We should try it on video here and just see what the sport mode's like. And then an off-road mode, which I have no idea what that does. Might be in the manual. I haven't actually looked at the manual for this thing yet. I haven't had to, although I should. So let's, just for fun, there's nobody behind me, let's just stop here. Let's pull over, actually. We'll pull over and then I can try and think of other things I haven't talked about yet. The windows have auto down and auto up, which is really nice. I haven't had that before. You can open the liftgate from inside. I haven't had to put fuel in this thing yet, but I see there's a fuel release lever on the inside here, so it's not like the Focus where you just pull it open. So something else you get on the GS trim that's not on the GX, you get a leatherette wrapped shift knob, which, whatever, but very nice. There's what the dual zone climate control looks like. You get a single button to choose between where air comes out. Cigarette lighter socket right here, rated for 10 amps apparently. You get warnings for if you're, or not warnings, but indicators for whether the passenger airbag's on and off. And you can also see whether any of your passengers, even in the back seat, whether or not they have seat belts on. That's very cool. Here's your cup holders. Very nice. They accommodate small or large cups. Very, very nice. Get a nice storage compartment down here. Higher trim levels, you get wireless phone charging. This one doesn't have it. I don't care. Nice armrest, very comfortable to rest my arm on. And it opens like that. You get a little tray that's removable. You could stick your phone in there if you want. You get a big void down here. 2 USB-A ports. You get another cigarette lighter socket in there. And that's a socket for an SD card slot. For the navigation, this thing does have Mazda's own navigation system, and you can pay a ton of money that isn't worth it for an SD card from Mazda that gives you all the map data. In an age of smartphones and Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, I don't know why you would pay for this. Maybe it just works nicer, I don't know, but I certainly didn't need it. Here's what that looks like. All the vents you can adjust, you can open or close them completely, which is very nice. Here's the back seat, leatherette seats in the back too. Up here, incandescent interior lights. The visor is quite nice because you got a lit mirror. And it's got an extension that comes out, which is nice for when you swing it over to this side, block the sun. Very, very nice. You get a manual mode, which is very nice. There's no paddle shifters, but you can just push the shifter up and down to shift. Very, very nice. And one of my favorite things about this car is the infotainment system. It is not touchscreen. This is a touchscreen. It does work as a touchscreen in Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, but for Mazda's own, when you're just in the stock user interface, it is not a touchscreen, and you control it by the buttons down here, and this rotary knob, which also is a joystick, and it also pushes in to select stuff. It's excellent. I love it so much. Press your home button, and you just turn your knob to select what you want, press in on it. My favorite thing to have up is the fuel efficiency monitor. And yeah, it's just fantastic. I really like this. And you can talk to it, which I only learned yesterday and I didn't know it. One of my favorite things about the Focus was the Microsoft Sync system. You could press a button and tell the car, call so-and-so, and it would call them. Well, this thing, it's the same thing. There's the controls here on the steering wheel. Very, very nice. Or you can just go into communication and go into your phone book. It'll read text messages for you when they come in. You can view a call history. Very, very, very nice. Really fantastic system. This is a dividing point. I think most people really hate that this isn't a touchscreen. I love that it isn't a touchscreen. I'm not a fan of touchscreens, and I think it's safer, easier to keep your eyes on the road when you're not having to reach up and look over to make sure you're pressing the right button. It's just so intuitive, and you memorize where the buttons are, and it's perfect. Radio is nice.
Younger brother. For my mother, I got a potato peeler.
The sound system, I'm not sure it's quite as good as the Focus's sound system. When you go for the higher trim levels, you get a Bose sound system. This doesn't have it, but it's perfectly fine, especially for my purposes. I have not tried, in the Focus I had a USB thumb drive plugged in to that had all my MP3s, all my music library on it. I haven't tried that in this yet to see if it'll read from that. But yeah, I really love how this works. It's all very, very nice, and you can customize a lot of stuff, how the lighting behaves, and your sound settings, and a lot of stuff you can customize how it works. But yeah, just because I'm a nerd, my favorite thing is the fuel efficiency monitor. And every time I gas up, and what you do is you reset the trip odometer, and it saves that tank of gas in this history here. So you can see for each tank of gas what your average fuel efficiency was. Very, very nice. Driver's seat is power. I've never had a power seat. Pretty nice. It does have manual lumbar. It's just a lever that you twist for lumbar. But yeah, really nice to have a power seat. Of course, now that I have it set where I'm going to keep it, it's never going to move again probably, unless someone else drives this. Radar cruise control, you can select how close or far you want to be from the car in front of you. And this is the gauge cluster, and there's quite a few different gauge clusters. I don't know if it depends on whether it's an American or Canadian car, or if it depends on the trim level, but I've seen CX-5s that have like an analog, like a real mechanical speedometer, and then this part over here is a screen. Well, in this car, you get a mechanical, temperature, and fuel gauges, and then this big screen with this little round insert for the speedometer. And actually, it looks so much like a real mechanical speedometer. It's quite nice. But you can see you've got the little info on the sides, give you a little compass, fuel mileage remaining up here, your odometer here, the outside temperature, very nice, average fuel economy, your instantaneous fuel economy. And I don't know why on earth this speedometer has to go up to 260 kilometers an hour. That seems quite silly to me, but such is the style at the time. And yeah, you hold this little, you can dim it by twisting this little peg. You can push it in and change what information is displayed on either side of the speedometer. There's how it came default. That's kind of a cool mode as well. And yeah, very nice. Now you got an info button here. You can display trip information, next service due date. I just leave it like that. Radio volume controls right here. In your cruise controls. You get automatic headlights. And luckily, unlike some cars today, when you do the turn signals, it acts like a real old-fashioned turn signal stock. You can actually set it so that when you bump it like that, it'll flash 3 times, but you can turn it off, which is what I did immediately. I just wanted to act like an old-fashioned turn signal stock. Perfect. And for high beams, it's old-fashioned as well. You can push it forward and it clicks into place for your high beams, and then you can pull it back to turn the high beams off. But if you have the lighting set to auto, like I do right now, and you turn on your high beams, it will automatically turn off the high beams when a car is coming towards you, or if there's a car driving in front of you, which that is very nice. Windshield wiper controls over here. So there's an intermittent function for the rear wiper, but the front wiper does not have an intermittent function. What it has is this has automatic rain sensing wipers, which I've never driven a car that had that before. So that's pretty cool. So I think twisting this changes the sensitivity to like when it'll come on. So there aren't intermittent wipers anymore. It's just the automatic wiper control. So I'm interested to see how well that works. And yeah, being a lower trim level, this does not have cylinder deactivation, which is too bad. But again, it's another thing I don't have to worry about failing, so good for reliability. And it also doesn't have automatic start-stop. Again, hurts your fuel economy, but it also is something, it's just one more thing that could possibly cause problems. So I'm okay with not having that stuff. Steering wheel tilts and telescopes. I've got it all the way out towards me just because I sit all the way back. If it could come out even more, that would be fine, but I'm quite comfortable just the way it is. My driving position is pretty much just like it was in the Focus, so I'm happy there. So let's put it into, using the My Drive switch, let's put it into sport mode, and let's go driving and see how the transmission behaves in sport mode. Ooh, look at that red speedometer. Let's see what it acts like. All right, let's see what it acts like in sport mode. Oh yeah, it's revving a little higher before it shifts. Woo! Oh my goodness, the throttle response is a bit different. Yeah, it's keeping the revs up a little bit. All right, back to normal. Don't need any of that. Let's turn around here and start heading back home. And I've got some stories to tell you while we drive home. Good turning circle in this thing. Actually, I think it's better than the Focus's turning circle, which is amazing. But yeah, when I test drove this thing up in the city, I turned around in the parking lot and I'm like, holy crap, I can't believe how tight this thing turns for how large of a vehicle it is. Very, very nice. So, let's talk about what I paid for this thing. So this thing was more expensive than all the other cars I was considering. Recall I said that my budget was $35,000 before tax and add-ons and all that stuff. MSRP of this thing was $38,000, so I blew my budget a little bit. After the add-ons, this thing was about $40,000, which is just so what I did not plan to pay for a new car. Now the dealership put add-ons on this thing, and I didn't agree with one of them. There were 3 add-ons they put on this thing. One was a $375 value package, and that gives you all-weather mats. I was fine with that. I actually wanted that because I wanted mats that are properly shaped for the footwells in this thing, especially considering that this thing has a floor-mounted gas pedal. The rubber mats that I had from the Focus would not have worked. So I'm glad to have proper all-weather mats, and that included an all-weather mat for the trunk, which is great. It's fantastic because of the TV equipment that I'm going to be loading in this thing sometimes. So yeah, glad to have a $375 value package. I'm fine with paying that. There was a tire and rim warranty. I forget what that costs. I was fine with paying for that because some of the roads where I live are not good, and I ruined one of the Focus's wheels years ago running over a pothole. Actually, it was before I bought the Focus, when my mom still had it. She hit a pothole that was bad enough it destroyed one of the wheels, and a new wheel had to be pulled from a junkyard from another Focus and put on. So tire and rim warranty, I'm fine with paying for that. But then there was an add-on that they forced me to have. They would not pull it off. And if I was a pettier person, and if I had more energy, and if I didn't mind possibly waiting longer to get a car, I might have pulled out of the deal and gone to Fredericton and gone to the Mazda dealership there and bought this. But I have a feeling it's probably something all Mazda dealerships have. It was a $584 wheel lock and window etch add-on. They etch the windows with a serial number and they put wheel locks on the wheels. And what they told me is that if this thing ever gets stolen and it's totaled as a result of it being stolen, I will get a $5,000 check from the dealership on top of whatever insurance gives me. If that's true, then fine, you know, it's not a scam, I guess. But I would have much rather have had that $584 in my pocket. I did the calculations. That ends up to a $13 a month difference in what I'm paying for this thing. I would have much rather had that money in my pocket. I think for $584, that is such a specific scenario, the car being stolen and subsequently totaled, I just don't think it's worth it. I live in a very safe part of the world. I just don't think it was worth it. I asked if I could have it taken off. They told me to pound sand. They didn't actually tell me that, but they might as well have. It was just a hard no, it's a requirement. Great, thanks. At least included in the price of the car, right? I don't know. So I had to have that add-on. So those were the three add-ons. Those were the only three add-ons that I got on this car. They wanted to sell me a plethora of others. I declined all of them. Thought of getting the extended warranty, but I decided don't bother. It's a high-quality Japanese-built vehicle, so whatever. Now, in the last video, the third part, the final video where I talked about my new car research and my announcement that I was going to buy a Mazda CX-5, I gave a hint of something really sucky that happened at the dealership. And I told you I'd tell you about it once I had the car, just because emotionally I just wanted to wait to calm down and stuff. We're in the car now, so now I'm going to tell you the story. The second to last time I was at the dealership, when I test drove the GT trim CX-5. The test drive went great, as you know. I'm driving a CX-5 now, after all. Test drive went great, and I brought the car back to the dealership. Well, first of all, I bought this thing from King Mazda in St. John, New Brunswick. So if you live in the area, maybe consider this, and maybe consider going to Fredericton to the Mazda dealership there. But based on how you feel about what I'm about to tell you. But I did my test drive, and I brought the car back to the dealership, and my sales rep goes, "What do you think?" And I said, "Oh, it's my favorite thing that I've test drove so far." And they go, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, I've test driven a lot of cars up to this point, and I think this is my favorite thing that I've driven." And my sales rep subsequently had a conniption fit upon hearing that I had been test driving other cars. And they go, "What do you mean you've been test driving other cars? It's a done deal. It was a done deal. It's a done deal." And I'm like, "What do you mean it's a done deal? I haven't signed anything," which I hadn't. I hadn't signed a single thing. And they go, "Well, if we had known that you were test driving other cars, we wouldn't have let you put the $500 deposit down," which I'm pretty sure is a lie, because King Mazda is owned by Steel Auto Group. I went to other dealerships that are also owned by Steel Auto Group, and the first thing I was asked at all of those dealerships was, are you test driving other cars? And the reason they asked that was so that they could recommend a model to me that I might like. And then before I left those other dealerships, each of them asked me if I wanted to put $500 down to reserve a car. They all did that. So it's certainly not a Steel Auto Group policy that I wouldn't have been allowed to put a deposit down on a car had King Mazda known that I was test driving other cars. I think it was just a lie. I think I was lied to. I don't know if my sales rep panicked over the thought of they planned on getting a commission, that they found out that I wasn't completely sold yet. I don't know. But the way they responded, like, and before and after they said that stuff, they just behaved very immaturely towards me. They just scoffed and looked away from me, and was just kind of, okay, you know, whatever. I couldn't believe it. I have my wallet open to these guys to the tune of $40,000, and that's how I get treated because I'm exercising my right as a consumer to test drive other automobiles? Screw off. I couldn't believe it when that happened. So now you can maybe imagine how I felt. I was just in such a state. Mom was doing her best to just calm me down. I was furious at how I was treated by my sales rep. And I drove the whole way home wondering if I should just pull out and go to Fredericton Mazda instead. But I didn't. I decided I wasn't that petty and I didn't want to wait longer to get a car. So I was just going to grin and bear it and pick up this car, which I did, and I'm glad I did that. But I am very disappointed in how my sales rep treated me, the way they spoke to me, and the fact that I'm quite certain they lied to me upon learning that I had been at other dealerships test driving other cars. Because I am so certain that whether or not I was going to other dealerships didn't matter. Of course they want your $500. Like, they're not going to turn you down because you're test driving other cars. They're hoping that they have the best product, which in this case they did. I'm sitting in a Mazda CX-5. You know, it should be water off their backs that I'm test driving other cars, because they work at a Mazda dealership. Clearly they believe in their product more than anyone else's. It was very disappointing. I was quite upset at how that all went down. And it was never mentioned again. The next time I went to the dealership to pick up this car, I thought of mentioning it to my sales rep. I thought of saying, you know, you almost killed this deal with the way you spoke to me last time I was here. But I didn't do it. I just wanted to get this car and get out of there. And that's what I did. A couple of days ago, Mazda Canada sent me an email inviting me to do a survey. I'm going to do it. And I'm going to talk about how my sales rep spoke to me, all because I was exercising my right as a consumer, buying my first new car ever, to test drive other people's cars. It's ridiculous. So, other than that, my experience at the dealership was positive. They were very happy to, you know, the wheel lock and window etch thing, I kind of want to suggest going to Fredericton anyway, because maybe they don't do that, but I have a feeling that all Mazda dealerships do it. So I won't worry about that, especially because I don't think it's a scam. I think there's a real value to it. I just don't think that value is very applicable to me. Other than that, my experience at the dealership was a positive one up to that point. And the day I picked up this car, it was a positive one as well. I had a fine time in the financial office. You know, they didn't get all worked up because I declined everything. It was just, you know, it was a very by the book signing papers process. So yeah, I'm quite sad that that happened. It ruined what would have otherwise been, it didn't ruin, it hurt what would have otherwise been a universally positive experience. So 1050, I love this car so much, I may be sold on Mazda for the rest of my life. I very well may be. Especially if this car does end up lasting long term and it ends up being a highly reliable vehicle long term for me. I may drive Mazdas for the rest of my life, but will I return to that dealership in St. John? I don't know. Not sure. But for me, it's not renting space in my head anymore. I'm just enjoying this car. I am in love with this car. I love driving it. I love it so much. And I've just been basically dragging my friends and family over to look at it because I'm just so proud to own it. So yeah. So it's not something I'm thinking about anymore, but I am going to complete that survey, and I think I am going to raise my voice. There's salt on the road here. I really hate that there's salt on the road. I have not rust protected this thing yet. The rust proofing place is on vacation until almost the second week of January. So I'm very anxious to get this thing rust proofed. But I can't do it yet. This has no rust proofing on it. It has no undercoating or anything. Mazda offered, you know, they wanted to sell me their rust protection package, but that it included undercoating, so I declined it. Now, if that said, they said it was a wax-based undercoating and not the traditional thick, rubbery, hard stuff that rots cars like it did the Focus. So I was kind of on the fence of whether or not I should just go for it. But I decided no, I'm gonna do what my grandfather did with his 92 Toyota pickup. I'm just gonna take this thing to Crown and get it rust protected by them every year. But I'm gonna be very anxious waiting for them to get off vacation so I can do it, because it's winter, there's salt on the road. Now luckily we haven't had hardly any snow, and the storm we had a week ago washed all the slush and the salt off the road. So I should be okay, and there's no snow in the forecast for almost a couple of weeks, so should be fine. But with that said, probably every few days. In fact, maybe I should go do it today, I don't know. I'll take this thing into the self-serve car wash, and I'll spray the undercarriage. Just keep it clean until I can get it crowned. And even after I get it crowned, I should probably just take it to the car wash once every week or two, and just spray the undercarriage. I want to do everything I can to prolong the life of this car. I don't want it to have a fate like the Focus, where it was still a beautifully running and driving car, although it had suspension issues that kept coming up, but it was just all rotten underneath. I want to be able to drive the wheels off this thing. I'd like to get at least 200,000 kilometers out of it. A lot of people with these things, they've gotten them up to 300,000 kilometers before major repairs need to be done. It's a Japanese car after all. And something I didn't know until recently, Mazda is 50% owned by Toyota. Well, there you go. So, yeah, I'm just super happy. I did chicken out in the financial office. So I put a down payment on this thing, almost half of what this thing costs. I put a down payment of that amount, and I financed the rest of it. My original plan was to finance it for 5 years, relatively short, avoid as much interest as possible. But while I was in the financial office signing papers, it was before I started signing papers, luckily, I said, I asked them just to be sure. I said, if I decide that, you know, I bit off a bit more than I could chew with the monthly payment, can I refinance it and change it to 6 years or whatever? They said, no, you can't, which surprised me, because I know the GM dealership you can, no problem, because my mother had to do that when she had her Buick Encore. So I chickened out. I financed this thing for 6 years. I got $100 less a month payment. Play it safe. I'd rather play it safe at the expense of a bit more interest, just in case it turns out I'm working a bit tighter of a budget than I planned on. I should be fine though. Now, if that said, I want to say something. It is not lost on me that it is the exception and not the norm that I'm 29 years old and able to afford a nearly $40,000 car. I am very, very, very thankful. I'm very, very lucky. I think I'm in probably a minority of people that are in a place in life where I'm at and able to buy a brand new car, especially one that costs this much. So I am very, very thankful. I'm thankful to have a job that I love, but also a job that compensates me fairly for the work that I do. It is primarily because of that job that I was able to afford this. And I also owe it to you guys as well. The views of the YouTube videos, the AdSense revenue, that in small part helps pay for this thing, and especially my Patreon supporters, your donations help in part pay for this thing. And especially because now I'm pretty much I've been lucky enough to have quite a lot of disposable income for the last year and a half. Not anymore, not now that I'm paying for this thing. I have no disposable income now. So I'm especially thankful for those of you who subscribe to Patreon, and to those of you who just watch the videos even. Because once again, it's going to help pay the bills. So I'm very thankful. But it is not lost on me how lucky I am to have been able to purchase this vehicle, to not have to buy a used vehicle, or to keep the Focus nursing along and dealing with who knows what else that would break on it. So I'm very, very thankful for that. I'm in a minority of people who are still in their 20s who could make a purchase like this. So I think about that every time I get in this thing. I think, wow, I can't believe that fate and circumstance has allowed me to purchase this amazing and beautiful automobile. So I just wanted to say that I'm not naive to how lucky I am at all. So that's it. Thank you so much for coming on a drive with me. I'm almost home here. I'm going to be home in about a minute and a half here. Thanks so much for riding along, checking out the new car with me. I am looking greatly forward to not having to worry about having reliable transportation for the next, hopefully, many years. I adore this car. I think I made the right choice. I think it's just the perfect car for me. I am so happy and just in love with this thing, and I look forward to thousands and thousands of kilometers spent in this thing. So that's it. Thanks so much for watching. And if you live in the Charlotte County, New Brunswick area, the Focus is for sale. I'm asking $4,000 for it. I may be open to negotiation on that. So if you're interested in a perfect running driving 2010 Ford Focus that needs a metal worker to patch it up so it can pass inspection next year, email me, themaritimegirl@hotmail.com. Alright, thanks, and I'll see you in the next video. Oops. What? I don't got nothing for you.